Scanning for audio.
Hello, welcome to show 600 of the Tin Dog Podcast. Yes, I know that many of you have been keeping track, and you know for a fact that there's well over 1,100 episodes being available on this particular feed, but specifically the Tin Dog Podcast, well, this is number 600. Thank you very, very much for sticking with me from the beginning, and those of you who've joined me on the way, I'm very, very grateful. Remember, you can still become a patron and have your name mentioned at the beginning of a podcast, and have my undying thanks. Now, with this being show 600, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I've been doing a lot of interviews of late, so it wasn't going to be one of those. No, what I thought I'd do is have the very first episode of something I'd like to call Dice Dad. So welcome to the very first episode of Dice Dad. Now, what's all this about, I hear you ask? I'm tuned into a Doctor Who podcast. Yes, I know you have. But it's my 600th show. I'm allowed to do whatever I want. So, bear with me. In the dim and distant past, and I'm talking the very early to mid-80s, I was, well, a geek. You can imagine, can't you? Comes as no surprise that someone capable of producing 600 Doctor Who-based podcasts was a little bit of a nerd. I was a role player. My first introduction to the games, well, was with Basic Dungeons & Dragons, the Red Box edition, if you live in the UK. Again, published by TSR. It wasn't the cardboard lino print thing. It wasn't the slightly less complicated War Games version. It was the first time the rules had really been brought together. Now, I know that Basic D&D had really come into its own as a game, as an introduction before you got Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But Basic D&D then became the Expert set, and then the Companion, and then the Masters, and then eventually the Immortals set, being the gold box, the black box, the blue box, and the slightly bluey blue box. But yeah, you know the ones. But you always started with the red one. Now, we didn't have a lot of money round our way, but I was a member of a drama club, and we had a photocopier. So I photocopied a few pages from the player's manual and went for it. Now, I was also dyslexic, so working my way through something, even 64 pages, was a monumental feat for me at the time. Yes, these days I have coping strategies, a yellow background, actually concentrating, not giving up, that kind of thing. But, you know, I was young. I was about 12. I was the ideal age for this sort of thing. So, I then went on to join Wallsend Adventure Role Players. Games Workshop at the time would sell some fantastic stuff. Actual games made by other people. If anyone's been into a Games Workshop these days, that will come as a bit of a surprise that they sell games made by other people. The sort of thing that you now see in the shop Travelling Man. So yes, just like through podcasting I've met some fantastic people, through role-playing I met some brilliant people. People like David Pickering, who was admittedly murdered by his landlord. Or my best friend of all time, Andrew Barber. Andy Barber, yes. Who died of leukemia almost 10 years ago. And I miss almost every day. And of course, some other people who haven't died to the best of my knowledge. Seriously though, they were brilliant times. Sundays in Blythe and then in Wallsend. Well, it was actually Walkergate Community Centre. But it was Wallsend Adventure Role Players, or WARP as it was known. They had a little knight character on their business card, and their business card was pinned up on the wall in Games Workshop, and people would come literally from miles in order to play our games. There were people who seemed so much older than us, people who were, 40-odd, all having a laugh. This is where I discovered other games like my all-time favourite Call of Cthulhu, Paranoia, Middle-earth adventure role-playing, whose books seemed so incredibly dense and complicated that I wasn't going to touch it with a barge pole. Yes, a lot of people played AD&D, but there were still Dungeons & Dragons going on, and Golden Heroes. Yes, I had some brilliant times playing Paranoia, and me and Andy had such a laugh that we were eventually not allowed to play in the same teams. at the same tables because we would just descend into howls of laughter. All of my initial drama training from an exceptionally early age, the improvisation, the characterization, all of that was coming into play instantly. The storytelling techniques that I use today in my writing all were honed in these sessions. Role-playing and drama sessions became part of me. They became literally an extension of my own psyche. I'm not saying anything bad or anything like that, but I loved role-playing. But, like most hobbies, other things come along. They push things out. You only have 24 hours in the day. I had a job eventually. I went to university. But these important moments stayed with me, and I thought about them every so often. I hadn't role-played for literally decades. And then my wife was sat on the sofa and I was sat on the floor, and we were playing Xbox Hobbit with my daughter. I was guiding them through, giving them hints and tips off the internet about what to do, and then we'd all change controllers, and it was all fun. And then she said, "You know what? Why don't you run a game of something for us?" And I thought, actually, that's not a bad idea. Now, like I said, my favourite game of all time was Call of Cthulhu, but there's no way I'm going to subject a 7-year-old to the incredible dark horrors of the universe. How was I going to approach this? Even on Dungeons & Dragons, the book says 11 and up. And, let's face it, I'd forgotten quite a lot. Yes, there were a few dice rolling around in the back of a drawer somewhere, so I'm sure I could pull something off, but I really felt a trip to eBay coming on. And so, I decided to sit down and go, yeah, what can we play? And of course, you always fall back on what you learn first. The rule of first exposure, very important. Let me explain that. Most people's favourite version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the first version they're exposed to. It be the radio version, or the book, or the film, God help them. And that's what sticks in your mind. That's what you use as your primary resource material. A lot of people will always see Marv in a certain way as he appeared on TV. Some people will only ever see him as he was in the movie. Some people might have come across the illustrated Hitchhiker's Guide, but that becomes the primary source because it is your first exposure. Now, religion in various forms also becomes your first exposure. It's your moral coding, and that's what informs you. So it's not a surprise that for this I went for my first exposure, which was Dungeons & Dragons, something that I had very fond memories of playing with people like Graham Howling and Paul Fellows from my past, Neil Mitchell. Those three people had an incredible tight-knit gaming session, of which I was allowed to join every so often. But their characters developed right through Masters. They were something like 20-odd levels by the time they were hitting their GCSEs. And yes, at my age, we were the first people to do GCSEs, but that's not important. So, I hit the internet, and I have some ideas. And I'll talk about those in the next Dice Dad session. So until then, be seeing you. On the 3rd of September 2016, Hooverville 8 will be with us. Possibly the friendliest convention in the whole of the UK. This year's guests include, but are not limited to, Kai Owen from Torchwood, Michael Jason from Doctor Who, the Valiard himself, Katie Manning, Joe Grant, Eric Sayward, Sophie Aldred, good old Ace, and Matthew Dale. For more information and to book your ticket, visit the Derby Quad website, www.derbyquad.co.uk. derbyquad.co.uk. That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.